Thank you very much, Sabine. Thank you very much. Excited to be here to present this project, my baby, in front of such a big crowd. Excellent to see the presentation so far. I see a lot of similarities. We are in different industries, but we see same challenges. There's one key difference though. There's not a single video in my presentation. I hope you'll still enjoy it. Good. SKF. I will tell the story of integrated planning, which is the start of a transformation. Some basics of SKF. We have a vision. In a world of reliable rotation, we are and will remain the undisputed leader in bearing business. We have a long history, more than 100 years, 73 billion SEK turnover, 44,000 or more employees. So we're big, we're beautiful, we're great. But that's not enough, is it? It is not enough. We need to rethink our ways of working. So I want to speak a little bit about the big why. Why are we doing this? Why do we have to rethink what we do? I have a slide here that I have stolen from my friends at SAP in Copenhagen, but I like it a lot. It is not really new. We see disruption is around the world. It's around all of us. We see it everywhere. Amazon and Alibaba, the world's largest retailers. Uber has no taxis, and Peter mentioned before the largest housing provider, Airbnb, owns no hotels and nothing. What I'm afraid of, just to be clear, those guys don't exist yet. What I'm afraid of is a player like this. ABC Industries, maybe entering the stage 5 years from now. World's largest supplier of bearings, produces not a single bearing. You know, maybe this is overstated, maybe this is exaggerated. There will always be some turning equipment. But none of us, however long the history, however successful, can feel safe. We cannot sit and wait and relax and feel comfortable in our business today. So we need to disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted. We heard this before. A new demand chain vision. This goes back to somewhere middle 2015. Our new CEO Alrik came in and just my boss Matthias and colleagues over there that we said, and he said, what is really our demand chain strategy? Where do we want to be, not in 2 years, but in 5, in 10, in 15? What's the big guiding star, the big principle that we pursue? He said, take a blank sheet of paper and think how you would operate this if you could start fresh. Think outside the borders, outside the box. There's no limitations in organization, how we do things. Tell me what you want to do, what is the best way for SKF to run this. We started by saying, what is our current setup? We have, I think, a rather simple supply chain setup. We have a factory that is supplying into a factory warehouse, and then through a network of warehouses we are selling and distributing to our customers. Nothing special really. How do we plan this today? Each of these nodes, each of these locations is planned locally, individually. We have one planner or a planning team per node. They're handling a different assortment. And we have limitations that come from there because we say each of those are planning towards a local optimum. There's a limited alignment of forecast. We can have different planning methods and so on and so forth. Excuse me. So what limitations do we have on top? What can go wrong in such a network? There are many failure modes. Take a practical example. One of the channels, one of the production lines that we are now piloting in a new way is channel 2 in Steyr. We have a guy sitting in the factory here, Michael, he's planning it in his scope. We have a guy sitting in China, Byron, he's planning the whole factory of Steyr and more. We have a lady in Singapore, Lim, she's planning a whole Steyr and the whole factory of Channel 2 plus more factories. So we have a lot of different hands and brains that are touching the same assortment in order to bring a total customer service to our customers around the world. That is not totally efficient because we're not pursuing the same target. What happens if the business cycle is pointing upwards and supply is short and we have too much demand? Those units planned individually, they will start competing for the product. They will start competing for the output from the factory. So we get, and we don't like this in SKF, we get sub-optimization and friction. What if the business cycle is turning downwards? Then we are starting to break. But if we break, we need to break in a coordinated way. Otherwise, we are introducing bullwhip and material is just stuck in the factory, and in the end, we haven't achieved much. So for full customer service, we need to rethink this. We need to do this in a better way. Before we set up a new way of working, we have thought, what is our design principles? And here we have worked with players in the same industry, with Optilon, with other companies and consultants to get a picture of what is working better than today. What can we do to improve the situation? We came up with some primary design principles. The first one being that we say we believe from the bottom of our heart that if you plan for a global optimum, you beat the sum of local optima. This is true in statistics and mathematics. It's also true here. We need to plan for a global optimum. Second point, we need to plan dependent flows together. What is a dependent flow? It's everything that happens on one item, one product, one bearing, all the information flow, all the material flow around the world. We need to have one person, one brain that takes care of this because it's all interconnected. Think about the setup where you sell one product in Taiwan, you also sell it in Mexico. We have those examples numerous times where we see that a huge customer buying in Taiwan, he is impacting how well we can serve our customers in Mexico 1 week later. It's all interrelated. We need to connect this. Those dependent flows are important. This statement we got from Optilon, Jens Stenqvist, is I think actually the smartest thing he's ever said. This is our guiding principle. Thanks for that. When you design a new setup, we said you can split the demand gen and the workload in any way you want, but these principles need to be intact. You need to keep your end-to-end flows together. Primary design principles, they will drive effectivity, and we'll come back on this on the next slides. We also have secondary design principles where we go for high level of automation, which coming to the fact of what we have heard before. We need automation, we need to automate those repetitive tasks. We need the human brain to act on the real value-added task, questioning what is happening and why and how can I make this work better. And a strict definition of business interfaces also. So what does this lead us to? It's a simple picture. It leads us to this. It leads us to an integrated planning setup. We refer to this as integrated planning because it integrates the demand planning activities, the distribution planning activities that happen around the world with the master scheduling activities that happens in the factory. All of this is integrated into one planning task in order to strive total optimization. Day by day, you work with the full data, the full extent of customer orders and the full extent of inventory, and you produce the best plan. And you react to the deviations in a global context. You're not pursuing the target of your own unit, but of the SKF in total. What would happen in a business cycle we said before, if we are accelerating and then we don't have competition between those units, for example, and then we can say, okay, how do we best balance supply and demand. Then we have all piano keys that we can play, and we have we have more degrees of freedom to optimize how we serve our customers and balance working capital and service. This is a little bit cryptic, so I would like to take a bit more a simpler view on the next slide here. If we split this down into business roles, what we foresee is that we need to have a planning layer that is responsible end to end from customer to supplier. You see this indicated with these red dashed lines. And all the planning inside one specific assortment is owned by one group of roles. In our vision, this would be in the best case just one person. This person, he has demand planning activities. It means he creates a base forecast. He works with customer information to create truly one forecast figure that drives the whole of SKF. We have distribution planning activities where I say, where do I put how much of my inventory in order to serve the customers best? How do I replenish the material between the warehouses and around the world? You have master scheduling activities. What is it that I should produce tomorrow, considering the global need I have around the world? I'm really looking at external customer demand, not at something which is a derived figure from it. And last not least, procurement planning. You need to optimize in the full chain. Do I purchase this raw material on the lead time, or do I invest in a component stock on site so that I'm more flexible? All of these decisions, they hang together. If you want to truly optimize, you need to bring this into one responsibility. So we are consolidating the planning mandate. We say all the planning is moved into this group of people, and with this great power comes great responsibility. So if you're responsible for the planning, you're responsible also for the total stock that you cause or create around the world, and the total customer service that you provide to your customers around the world. Those three things hang together: planning responsibility, stock responsibility, service responsibility. There's obviously a execution layer as well. You have, of course, execution tasks that will still take place. There is no arguing on that. You need to execute the production plan. You need to execute and replenish your warehouses and so forth. Key point is we have one person, one team that decides for their assortment, not only month by month, how much should I stock, but really operationally, day by day, what to produce, where to put this stock so I can serve my customers best. You will understand that this leads to a lot of changed tasks. Planning tasks are suddenly moving from one location on the globe to another. There are new interactions that are taking place. People have suddenly new speaking partners. And there are also changed incentives. This is a great transformation that we are doing here, and there is lots of challenges. In my second part here, I would like to go into more details on which is the challenges that we have faced of mindset, of difficulties, and so on and so forth. Before that, a very quick look into how we've approached this. We have started with a POC, a proof of concept on a small scale. And then we ran a pilot, and we have now gone into a deployment phase. These are our factories and factory locations and in major stock locations around the world. In the pilot, we have worked with 2 factories, 5 warehouses, and global sales, while full deployment will be with the full scope of 50 plus factories, 20 plus warehouses, and global sales. So this is a huge undertaking. And this is nothing you want to do over the weekend and big bang on Monday, everything is different. You need to take very controlled, conscious steps how to bring about this change. So, some mindset challenge. things that we've heard is, wow, this is the biggest change in SKF's demand chain since 30 years or more. This is never going to work. How do you approach this when you get such a question as a project leader, as a project team, as a project sponsor? We also have more positive voices. Oh, this is great, this will work, but you will never be able to deploy it. Theoretically it works, but we'll not be able to do it as a unit. Then there's this doesn't affect me mindset. Yeah, this demand chain project is something for the demand chain nerds. Let them figure out different procedure, how to calculate plus and minus, but this doesn't affect me. Which is wrong because it affects everybody. It affects a huge group of people. Decision power will move from local to global. This has an impact for the organization because moving the planning, maintenance, and consolidating, yes, that sounds nice, but it also means you're taking it from somebody who has that today, and that can hurt. Some tasks will move from local to global. Some tasks will even move from continent A to continent B. So people who do it today in an Asian time zone, maybe tasks are moving to another continent. That has impacts on how the whole process landscape interacts and comes together. So you question the organization. The setup that we have today, is this the most suitable, the most fit to host and to run processes like this? We come into performance management, performance measurement. I mentioned it before. Incentives are changing. You need different incentives how to steer and follow up your manufacturing units, your warehouses, and so forth. This has a great HR dimension. And last but not least, you have those guys. Show me the money. Of course, you need to show them the money. But this is difficult because if you go into such an undertaking, yeah, you can calculate what the effect will be. You can estimate when this effect will come. But still, in the big question is still you need to have somebody who believes in this journey, somebody who is willing, an organization who is willing to upfront invest into this, knowing that the first 2 years, you will not have a payback that pays you back your investment. So think about the strategy, how to convince those guys. You need to have a vision, you need to communicate that vision, and you have to have the organization on your side. You need to win a critical mass that believes, like yourself, that believes into that transformation, that this is for a greater good. Then there are some not so much fun parts. And Christiane mentioned at the beginning, no backstage access, thank you. But unfortunately, you need some backstage access. With SKF having something like 500,000 SKUs managed across roughly 40 installations of 5 different ERP systems, that's a challenge. Do you have full visibility of your data today? Do you have full control of your data and reference data today? Do you have master data even on your agenda or your management's agenda? For safe travel on autopilot, and I will come back to this autopilot on the next page, you need to take care of your input. Like we say in Latin, purgamentum init, exit, purgamentum, or shit in, shit out in plain English. Master data and supply network management. I have my dear friend Max over there. This is a dry topic. You need to go through this in the backstage. This is all behind the scenes. Those guys will not be on the first page of a newsletter. Look at the great data maintenance they did. You know, this is not sexy. How are you challenging, or how are you taking this challenge of getting your time, money, and resources to work on that? Because with that backstage dry, dirty job not being done, you will not succeed and be able to stand on a podium. For that, you need to have the right team. You need to have the right people that are willing to make their hands dirty and go into this. They need to thrive on master data. Buy-in from operational teams. So the people in the process. A change of daily routine is a shock. People will say, what? Tasks are moving out? What am I going to do? Will I still be needed? You will immediately have questions on will my department be reduced? Is there still a job for me there tomorrow? You need an answer for those guys, a true and honest answer. On the other hand, guys will say, tasks are moving in. How am I supposed to plan all that? How am I supposed to handle all this? And here we come back to the autopilot. What we have today is planners around the world. They sit in their car on the steering wheel, driving left, right, changing gears. But mentally we need to change that picture. In future they will have 15, 10, 20 cars on autopilot. And each of these cars represents a warehouse that hosts their department somewhere around the world, 1,000 kilometers away. How do you handle those autopilot cars? You need to take care of your input data. You need to take care of what are my parameters in there. So you need to change the focus. I would like to stay a little bit on this. They will not steer the wheel. They will need to ask themselves, are my process performance indicators within normal limits? If not, why? Are my planning parameters tuned to best performance? Is my input to the autopilot correct? What is my customer's demand? It's not what is my customer demand. What is my customer's demand? Be ahead of the customer, be ahead of the process. Can I already anticipate or feel or see what is happening out there? What is the reason for the certain customer behavior? Why am I suddenly seeing these big orders, or why do I suddenly miss and lack orders and stuff like this? These are the relevant questions where I think you need to have the human brain, a skilled brain that is looking and questioning what happens. This is something a computer, at least in the near future, will not be able to do. Some lessons learned. Find your dependent flows. This has been critical for us, that we create this awareness of dependent flows, and we need to find and define those dependent flows. Remember the triangle. I hope we all have it intact. If not, I think we have a problem. Planning responsibility, stock responsibility, service responsibility needs to be in one hand. Secure a true management buy-in, and it's not enough to have statements in a newsletter. You need to have the management behind you, because you will face headwind. You will not produce a return on investment in the first years, and you will be questioned on, is this activity really paying off? So you need somebody strong, and we have that. Thank you very much. We have that in SKF to carry us through the project. Communicate early. Think big, but start with small steps. This is clearly risk management. We start with a small proof of concept, small scale, go to pilot, and we take the next steps. Get into the learning curve. I'm a strong believer that not everything can be fully baked through and thought through in theory. At a certain moment in time, jump, take the step, and get into the cold water so that you get into the learning curve. First, you need trust, then you get thrust. The people who day by day work with this, the management who sees the first signals that we're doing the right thing, you need to establish this, and then you get thrust and acceleration. And last but not least, have the right team. And a very personal learning from myself is, let them do their job. For me as a project leader, that was a challenge in the beginning. We're coming from a small team and then was growing step by step. Don't let yourself be the bottleneck. Have the right team and let them do their job. We have all those intelligent brains here around the world. And make sure you use them correctly and let them do their job. Which brings me to the last slide. It means I should be inside my time frame. The future. Integrated planning is an activity we pursue, and this will take some time to have it fully deployed, the organization changed, the people trained, and everything. But in the big scheme of things, in the context of supply chain 4.0, this is really just the first step. Now what we do is we are installing this planning brain, which is both a human and a system brain, in order to have control of our house. But this is a foundation, an enabler, the first step to make sure we can also do this in the future. Forward integration, we do it already today. I mean, we have, of course, EDI connections and stuff like this. This is a concept from the 80s, but we need to have a planning brain installed to be able to reach out to our customers and forward integrate through different means with new technology and so forth. In the same dimension, we have also a backward integration. Can we cooperate closer with our suppliers and know their capacities and capabilities and use this information inside our planning algorithms, inside our planning process? Another dimension is, and this is a bit buzzwords, smart data, big data. We need a planning brain in our company so that we can connect smart data input like consumer sentiment. Yeah, maybe we can download how much fidget spinners are trending on Facebook and then translate what this means for small bearing demand. Sensor data, we need to connect this somewhere. Installed base, we know there's a finite number of trucks and locomotives and windmills out there. In order for this data that we get where we can do prognostics and all of these things, but we need to feed this again into a planning brain. Where would we feed this to if we don't have this planning brain? And last but not least, there is also an increased clock speed. Things are happening faster and faster every day. There is more and more possibilities and access to real-time data from manufacturing execution systems. You want to use this input immediately to update your plans and then react to deviations. We have more and more real-time data from logistics. Okay, a transportation to China, the boat will be delayed or whatever happens. We want to have this information immediately and process it immediately so that we can say and see, can we navigate around this bottleneck? So integrated planning for us is an enabler of the future. It connects to supply chain 4.0 and those activities on those 4 different dimensions. It will be a journey that will keep us busy for some years to come, and it will hopefully make us an even stronger and better company for another 100 years of successful history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jörg. Thank you for such an illustrative example of a very transformational journey. I mean, it must have been very interesting, I presume, also for the audience, because you're really doing the work that we're trying to entice when it comes to digitalizing supply chain. I mean, you answered, I had a lot of questions, but you answered most of them, but here we have a lot of questions for you, so I'll start to shoot them. Did you change planning organization in a big bang or day after day?
Well, we are in this situation right now. We have not changed the planning organization yet. We are looking into the different pros and cons of different setups. This is actually a key question of us right now. How do we adjust and adapt for the future?
And how do you plan to expand the integrated planning to the suppliers?
Well, first of all, I like to call this the Michael Jackson approach of improvement. So we are starting with the man in the mirror, ourselves. First of all, we need to clean our house. And when this is done, we want to see how we expand this to suppliers. We have activities in place where we today do alignment of capacities and on a tactical level. I think that in this area, there will be more opportunities in future on an even more operational day-by-day optimization.
And we have so many questions. And when taking power from locals, speaking of local, we also indirectly create a lack of accountability in local terms, like you mentioned also in your presentation. It was not my plan, not my thought, and so forth.
Exactly.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Important for us here is again that we're working on the right incentives. It is of course true that what you cannot control, you cannot be made responsible for. So how we are running performance and profitability measurement and how we follow up and units and also persons needs to change drastically. And that is a challenge that we are facing. One step that we've also taken is that we say, and we have actually a specific work package on this inside our project, that we say, how do we keep, especially with our sales force, close contact? Because imagine a sales manager would tell us, and they are asking us already now to say, okay, I'm selling here on continent A, but the planner is sitting 5,000 kilometers away. How does he know what I'm going to need? And you need to bridge this through a process or a setup and the right people skills. This is a challenge that we're facing, and we have found our solution, we believe, which is in a strong demand management team that is belonging to a demand gen organization with that mindset and those skills, but they're thinking and working in a sales dimension, country, customer, region.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Digitalization is also so much intertwined with the mind shift, with the human capital that you have, the employees, and also the stakeholders. And that's why I see the question says here, could you estimate how much time meetings you've had to get the right buy-in from stakeholders? Yeah.
No.
Okay. You don't want to scare them off,
It's
or entice them a bit on a positive note.
Well, the positive, I can only say for us, what was very positive is we had our new CEO Aldri coming in, and he was like, we need to rethink everything.
Yeah.
We have 100 years history, that's great, but what do we do now? I mean, this is 100 years in the history will not guarantee us 10 into the future. So with the organization all over the world being shaken like this, then you have the opportunity to connect to those guys that suddenly feel like, oh my God, what's happening here? And you start to build with them a new way forward. How are we going to address this challenge together as one big team?
And I think that's an important key takeaway also to all of you here, because that's a key question. Many probably want to try to entice change or digitalization, but how do you go about it? And that's why this is a very good example of how you go about it. It isn't easy, but otherwise you become the Kodak moment if you don't, especially if you're in manufacturing.
Exactly.
Let's see, 2 more questions. We've got so many, and afterwards at the meet and greet, please just remember your questions, and then you can approach Jörg with them. Anyone that you find would be relevant? Yeah, that one was actually one of mine as well. How is SKF working with 3D printing as a production method? Bearing in mind you said the disruptive. That's how you can become the bearing company who doesn't produce.
Here you may be asking the wrong guy. I certainly don't know all the initiatives that are ongoing in 3D printing. I know one example which we had actually in a facility that I was responsible for some years ago, and that is in Russia. We have had those cooling liquid nozzles that were horrendously expensive to get to a Russian facility because not produced there. We had to import, huge tax and so on. And we had a clever team there who they bought a 3D printer, and then they started to print this nozzle. Now, of course, this is technically not comparable with a bearing that is difficult to produce, but the cost has come down is a fraction of 1,000. And those little examples that can inspire to try those things on other areas as well.
What methods do you use to predict sales, and what accuracy do you get?
The last part of that question I would need a little bit more time to answer, but what we believe in is we need to build an as good as possible base forecast, and with the opportunities we get here from S299 and the tools group applications are great. We can look at much more details, much more actual line-based data, customer requirements instead of actual invoice dates, and we can build a forecast that is much closer to customer demand. One thing on top of that is that inside SKF we have, being a machine in the manufacturing industry, we have the luxury of having order book information. Not all bearings are, so to say, ordered tomorrow for immediate delivery. So there is, of course, an order book. What we are working on, and we have a very good dialogue here with Optilon, is how can we utilize this forward-looking order book information in creating a forecast. It's something that we in SKF did in our current tools since quite some times, which I think was a strategic advantage that we have had. It's something we believe we should also pursue in the future.
Maybe some machine learning tweaks to that, and
right, exactly. Now I could talk another 30 minutes here. We have some good ideas that instead of having a deterministic approach with formulas and backward testing in statistics, that you have that you machine learn what does a current sales history and current order book situation, what would this produce as a forward-looking demand. But here we are in the very, very early idea phase.
Well, Jörg Schlager, thank you so much for that. It was really insightful, and please do pose the questions. I'm sure you have a line of people doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.